If you want to retire to Europe, you've got a whole lot of options, but there are a couple of things that you should consider. How is your pension going to be taxed? How easy is it to get a residence permit? What is the culture in the country that you're going to? What I've learned from working with people who are retiring is that their needs are different, of course, than someone who is currently running a business. That's true not only of your tax planning. If you don't have a business, your tax planning may be easier, if not just different. But also, they might want a slower pace of life. And so with that in mind, I recently talked to expats everywhere, and they asked for some of my favorite destinations to retire in Europe. Obviously, Europe is just one place you can retire. Many people choose to go to Asia, and in particular Southeast Asia, Latin America, but Europe remains one of the most popular places. I'm going to share with you 5 retirement destinations that you might not think even Nomad Capitalist would recommend. Places that are a bit more laid back, places where learning the language is easier, places where getting citizenship, even in your golden years, is a possibility, and places that lower bureaucracy, because who wants to be screwing around with the government when you're retired? Here's the list.
Andrew, I'm so excited to have you today. Can we start with number 1? What's number 1 for you?
Well, I think the number 1 place, if you're coming from an English-speaking country, is Ireland. The weather is better than people might imagine, especially in the East Coast in Dublin. One thing I see, especially with older clients, is languages are an issue. And so if you can take the language learning process off the table, if you can feel confident going out into the world and saying, hey, I'm just going to speak English, I don't feel badly, I don't feel the need to learn anything, people understand me, that's valuable. If you have investments overseas, Ireland has a friendly tax program for new people coming in as foreigners, so you can potentially exempt those. And so there's some tax friendliness there. The bureaucracy is some of the best in Europe. They've got what's called the Stamp Zero program, and that doesn't lead to citizenship. There are other ways to lead to citizenship, and if you want a second citizenship, 5 years, you speak the language already, you can get that citizenship. It's arguably one of the best in Europe. And I think having friendly people where, again, if you're from the US or Canada, it's a little bit closer to what you're used to than mainland Europe. And I think that while it may not be the intuitive choice for people, it's ticks a lot of the boxes of the problems people run into.
Okay. Is there anything that you would say would be, don't go to Ireland if you want this?
Low prices, low rent. I do think what's interesting is some of the places we've talked about in more emerging Europe actually have more expensive groceries than a place like the UK or Ireland. You can get pretty affordable groceries. One of the cool things is you can get the stuff that, if you like to cook, you can get the stuff that you need, and it's in your language again. Certainly, it's a more progressive country. I've spent some time in Ireland. I don't feel that as uncomfortable as I would have in the US. But it is not, an emerging country. It is not a super conservative country anymore. So if someone's looking for a super conservative place to live, then Ireland's probably not the place. But I will tell you that you can get along with everybody. People are friendly. To me, that's something to optimize for, especially if you're in retirement. You don't want to be fighting with people.
Right. Okay, great. Number 2?
Number 2 is Greece. I've spent some time in Greece over the years. Number 1, again, they have some tax-friendly options. So for pensioners, for example, they've got a great tax scheme. They have a lump sum tax scheme if you're still doing some work on the side or you still have a business. So people think that Greece is this highly bureaucratic, very high tax country. And it is high tax if you were from there. But if you haven't lived there before, if you're bringing in a pension, if you're bringing in business from overseas, it can actually be a very tax-friendly place to live. And surprisingly, out of all the golden visas, for example, in Europe, they've been some of the best at getting things through the backlog. They've been much more efficient than a country like Portugal, for example. And so they've really shown an interest in getting people to come in and invest in their country with tax incentives, with residence permits, attracting retirees. Out of all the countries that people, the main 3, I would say people talk about, Spain, Italy, and Greece in Southern Europe, the tourist hotspots, the retirement hotspots, I think the Greeks are the nicest, the most service-focused. I was just in Corfu a couple of weeks ago. Had an amazing experience. I think that for me, the architecture is the most interesting. You can get some of the most sleek, not glass tower kind of sleek, but nice architecture, new properties, even compared to France, the south of France. I like the food. I like the weather. I like the architecture. I like the people. And I think it's had a pretty bad reputation from the government side. I think they're doing all right on that regard.
Okay, and with Ireland, you mentioned language was easier, obviously speaking English. So would someone struggle in Greece with the language?
I think if you live in one of the larger islands or one of the tourist islands or in perhaps the right part of Athens, I think you can do all right. So yeah, I mean, I've been in Corfu, I've been in Crete. Those are two of the bigger islands, and it's never been an issue.
And you haven't had like island fever or anything, like feeling a little too remote?
On those islands, I think you wouldn't. I mean, especially on Crete, I think it's more of a year-round island. Corfu is a bit more seasonal. I mean, I think Corfu is the fifth or sixth or seventh biggest island. I mean, that's up to you, right? I mean, I was talking to a guy yesterday. He lives in an island with 15,000 people. That's what he wants to do. That's not what I would want to do. But if you're looking to retire and be left the hell alone, maybe that's what you want. But, yeah.
Okay. Number 3?
Number 3 is Spain. This is me looking at objective criteria. You know, Spain has a less tax-friendly program. I mean, they have some kind of program if you're coming in. It's going to cost you more from a tax perspective in Spain, which is something that's not my cup of tea. But I understand from an objective perspective, Spain has a lot to offer. The service isn't there to the same levels you would get in Greece. But there is a lifestyle that some people like. If you're retired, if you're at a slower pace, you have a lot of options to choose from. You're closer to a lot of other stuff in Europe. You can go skiing in Andorra. I mean, just the proximity is interesting. So I don't love the tax plan, although there are some ways to save taxes there for a handful of years. But, I think that for retirees, it offers something.
Okay, lifestyle just gives you a little more travel, flexibility. Like what would be someone's lifestyle that you would say, go to Spain for this lifestyle?
Chill out. Don't work too hard. Go and have a siesta. Go and have a cup of coffee at 2 p.m. It's laid back. I mean, that's not particularly my vibe, but I'm thinking, okay, if someone's retired, that could offer them something. And I know people who live in Spain, and they say, yeah, it is very laid back. And if you go to a store, I mean, no one's going to rush to sell you. So if you just kind of want to be, chill, what they would say in Serbia, polako, just relax, tranquilo, right? Then Spain's a place for you. It's not going to have the service culture of even a Greece or an Ireland. But, it's a place that you can chill.
Okay, so more laid back, but definitely need to have patience.
Patience. Yeah, I have no patience. It wouldn't work for me. But maybe by the time you're retired, I look at my dad has become patient. Okay. So maybe one day.
All right. So viewer, go over to their channel to watch that series and, of course, get other resources from Nomad Capitalist. Now let's move on to number 4.
We work with successful people at Nomad Capitalist. I think Monaco is this very misunderstood tax haven. It's zero tax. If I move to Monaco, it ain't zero tax. It's a great place for people who are retired. I think that's the vibe, not because it's Spain. I mean, things do function. The difference there is there's obviously a bit of snobbishness, but if you avoid a few places, if you avoid the Café de Paris, in a few other places, you'll be fine. But there's an element of, fine dining, obviously, fine living, wines. I mean, everything's very, very, proper. And so if you want that kind of lifestyle, it's a different person than who wants to go to Spain. But, it's kind of designed, in my opinion, for retirees in terms of how they, have, their tax set up for passive income. It's not going to be good for someone running a business. But if you're retired, if you want that Mediterranean lifestyle, France, I mean, I had a guy who sold a property in the south of France. He said it was the best day of my life, just getting rid of French bureaucracy. So for me, living in Nice or Cannes or somewhere, nearby is perhaps going to be cheaper. There's just so much bureaucracy. If you're retired, I don't want to deal with it now as a working age person. Imagine you're retired. How much bureaucracy do you want to deal with the French government? So if you want that lifestyle, I think Monaco is obviously expensive, but you can rent properties. I mean, the yields there are very low, so you can rent something for a tiny fraction of its purchase price. You can get a good, retirement tax plan. You can have this fine level of service. It's very sophisticated. It's a very exclusive address. So I think for someone who has, been successful, you can rent small apartments for 5,000-6,000 euros a month. That's not nothing. but there's a lifestyle there that appeals to some people.
Okay, so maybe the cost of living is higher, but it offsets it by not as bad of bureaucracy.
Yeah, I mean, living in France and dealing with their tax system and dealing with their just the bureaucracy. If you want to buy a property, for example, I mean, it's a pain. And I think Monaco, it's a very small country, obviously one of the smallest. They've made things simple. It's easy enough to get a residence permit there. I really am a believer. And by the way, Ireland the same. I mean, it's almost bureaucracy with a smile. Why do you want in your golden years to be dealing with endless forms and paperwork in a foreign language? Monaco much easier to deal with for someone who has the money.
Okay. And then you don't think that the tourism would get a little annoying at some point, or is there a way to avoid that?
They do have a lot of events that come there, the yacht show and the races and all that. I think that's part of the lifestyle. If that's what you want. I mean, it's a high flying lifestyle. It is the opposite in some ways of Spain. Not that Spain is low flying, but it's more calm, and Monaco is not as calm. It's calm in some ways, but there's always something happening. So, you can live. There's areas of Monaco that aren't as touristy. You can live there, and they're cheaper. You don't have to live next to the casino, for example.
Right.
I looked at a bunch of buildings there last year. I mean, there's some areas that, I think most of the year will be pretty untouched.
Okay. And number 5?
Number 5 is a bit more emerging. It's Montenegro. This is for someone who wants more freedom. They want the lifestyle, but they also want a lighter touch than what you would get in Western Europe. The one thing that Montenegro, if you want to have a residence permit there, is they really push you to live there the vast majority of the year. So that's always a question I would ask someone if I'm working with them is, are you looking to retire in one place? Are you looking to have a base and travel around a lot, right? So in Monaco, if you don't want to be there for the race, go somewhere for the week. You can probably rent your place out and make a fortune. But Montenegro is going to be, more where the kind of place where I have an apartment there, and the woman who pays my bills says I walk in and I pay with cash, and there's a couple guys at a card table smoking on a Tuesday afternoon. And it's just no one's in a hurry, but you don't have the rules that you have in the European Union. You don't have the regulations. Now you don't have all the services either. So if you want to buy furniture, it's a bit lower selection. It takes longer. I think it took me a year to get a bed imported from Italy or something. But there's just a very light touch. They leave you alone. It's just, it was funny. I had this woman come actually to Corfu, and we were driving around, and just I'm very much I may not like the rules, but we abide by the rules when we're in a place with rules. And she's just nobody's doing that. And that's just kind of the culture. And so, if you want a place where they're a bit more laid back, Montenegro's there. Porto Montenegro, the yacht club is beautiful. They've been expanding it amazingly. They have so many restaurants there now of all different cuisines. They have a great restaurant, the Regent Hotel, which is just kind of your typical seafood on the pier kind of fare, but they have Chinese food. They have all kinds of stuff, clubs, co-working space. So I hear more people going there. Vitalik Buterin, the Ethereum guy, is hosting events there. So it's just kind of rugged beauty. You have, unlike a lot of places, beautiful beaches, and then quickly going up into these cliffs. And just a really pretty landscape. They leave you alone. It is more rugged in most of the country, but you also have this Porto Montenegro Yacht Club where you can go, and you could, now that there's enough restaurants and enough things to do, you could spend every day there if you want, going to the nice coffee shops, the fancy groceries, or you could go to the very kind of old school, almost kind of Yugoslav vibes, villages, or go back and forth.
Okay, and overall cost of living is lower than the others on your list.
I do think groceries there, are going to be a bit more expensive than a place like in Ireland because there's not as much selection. You can get just as fine of stuff, or you can get cheaper stuff. I think it's hard to beat a place like Ireland or Spain on pricing, but certainly cheaper than Monaco, maybe comparable to Greece. I'm not an expert in Greece groceries, but certainly, the cost of renting a property, that's going to be lower. So Ireland and Monaco, very expensive places for property. Greece and Spain, not as much, but Montenegro is it's in the middle because they use the euro. One of the places that would be interesting to see how it develops is next door in Albania. I was there 5 years ago. Vlora is in the center. Saranda is in the south, actually right across from Corfu. You can see Saranda from Corfu. Albania is the cheap place in that region with beaches, and they are building it up. I'm not sure it's there yet for a retiree, but it might be in the future. I mean, if you want cheap, you go to Saranda. They have their own currency in Albania, not the euro. And so you can get apartments for 25,000 euros. That could be the retirement destination of the future. But for now, if you want the polished Balkan jewel, I think it's Montenegro, but it's not going to be the cheapest place in Europe. But you're going to get more freedom. It's going to be a bit more chill in a way of we're not going to hassle you.
Right. All right. I noticed that Portugal is not on your list, and Portugal has been quite popular for a lot of people recently. So why is Portugal not on this list?
Well, you said, pick the top 5. Portugal could be close. I mean, there's so many different ways to retire, obviously. I mean, some people, we had a couple say we want to move to Austria, not your typical retirement place. So there's so many places you could put on the list. Portugal, I'm frustrated with the bureaucracy there and the slowness. They canceled their tax incentive. I feel like I don't have a problem with Portugal. If people want to retire to Portugal, they can. If, hey, I'm going to go and get my residence permit, it's going to be more bureaucratic. Maybe takes a little bit longer up front. And I'm cool with that. Once I'm in, I'm in. And hey, my issue isn't reducing taxes, then I'm fine with that. The challenge is if you're going to learn a language, I think Spanish in Spain is more useful. And I'm a believer in emerging markets. I think that for any number of reasons, it's good to have a foothold somewhere in Latin America. And so if you speak Spanish, that's going to make it much easier to go anywhere but Brazil. And so there's nothing against Portugal. I mean, I think it could easily be number 6. It could easily, take over one of these spots for some people. Just from, my perspective is limited bureaucracy, government's off your back, friendly for taxes. Please come to our country. We're glad that you're bringing your money here. And for those reasons, it may not, quite make the cut. But, it's a good place and there's people retired there. And, it's a faster place than Spain to get citizenship once you're living there. But again, you have to learn the language. And I think one of the things that I've seen with English speakers is an exaggeration of the ability to learn the language. Probably a lot of folks who are thinking about moving overseas already know a little bit of Spanish. It makes it a little bit more intuitive sense to them. So, that's a small point in favor of a place like Spain.
Great points.
By the way, I mean, there are so many places that you can move, not just in Europe, but in the world. One of the places we talk about this is we have our 4-day annual event. It's called Nomad Capitalist Live. We host it in my winter home of Kuala Lumpur. And we get together and we talk about this. And we bring in people from dozens of countries around the world. So you can not only hear us talk about the opportunities in different places to live, to invest, to bank, to get a passport, but you can also talk to the people who are actually doing it. So we've got about 750 people coming this year from all around the world. And we sold it out actually in 14 days. If you go to nomadcapitalist.com/live, you can get on the waiting list. But to me, if you come and see that event, you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. What are the best 5 for me? What are the best 5 for you? What are the best 5 for someone else? I made this list with the idea of what does a retiree want? Right? They're probably not quite as focused on tax as I am. They're probably a bit looking to chill out a bit more than I am. And that's why a place like Spain made the list, even though I wouldn't live in Spain. But there's just endless options. And if you want to hear about it, Nomad Capitalist Live is the place.